apparently your voice may not reach to every corner. I got lucky. Okay.
Will you be leaving the questions?
I will try. Okay, and feel free to interrupt me anytime. Okay. The thing today is really, I want us to all ask one question. Is Hong Kong a condensed, intensified, close-range adjustment problem? I missed some typos here. Adjustment problem in China. I just want you to think about it. Okay. So let me recall what we tried to do. I said, let's go through, put ourselves back to Hong Kong for roughly about 38 years of history. In sense, what did it feel Hong Kong? And I end up with, say, it must be really quite frustrating. And today, I really want to look at the similarities, China's behavior specifically, and the similarities. And out of this, we want to ask a question. It must be more than just economics. There's more. A lot of things are coming together for such a thing that seems to disrupt, turn peace-loving, very resourceful, a very creative society into something totally different. So I may have exaggerated. If you disagree with what I just say, by all means too. All right, it's just my opinion. So let's remind ourselves what the history, what the 38 years of history tells us. I start off saying that there is a hardcore opposition. They were suspicious of the communist Chinese when the Basic Law was formed, and it was somewhere across the Tiananmen Square event, or you can use other words. Then afterwards, the British Hong Kong government's reform consolidate and develop really a coalition of opposition. At the same time, the Hong Kong government claimed to be like pro-market, always free competition. It's very much like, I mean, even right now, Hong Kong does not have anti-monopoly law. It is just maybe unfettered pursuance of profits. In this background, think of the story we talked about yesterday. For human values, for humanity reasons, the pro-democrat, those that are opposition, say, well, yes, by all means, the British change of law, create welfare and attract some poor mainland Chinese to come in, but it's for family unions and so on and so forth. Welcome them. Then the government say, no. I can welcome them, but I will not get them have access to welfare until 7 years later. Then the pro-democrats say, no. I want to let them have it within 1 year. Okay, so that attracts a huge high rate of influx of movement. Then that stress the medical sector, and the pro-democrats or that kind of people say, no. We have to preserve the standard. So even if you graduate from Chicago, you have to take 3 exams, pass them, practice 1 year, then you can try to get your license and renewable. Then the government say, well, if that's the case, we have all these immigrants. The chief executive say, I need to build houses. And then the opposition say, no. I don't give you the budget. Why? Because if you build affordable houses, it will compete with the existing homeowners' houses and press the price down. No. Then at the end, people in, immigration in, the congestion came, poor medical and social service, housing sector, and the tycoons get the coup. And so what do? They haul land, they do not build, as I showed you yesterday, after release of rent control, they don't build new apartments and so on. House price went up. Feel the stress. You imagine that you're living there. Then go further. China has developed, I'm talking about from 1997 to now, a lot of change. The land price in Hong Kong go up. So many of the factories, they move the factories to mainland, keep the land and turn into property developers. And that's economic adjustment, that's fair. But then the free market keep on saying, okay, come in. I welcome the investment from mainland China. And what do? Hong Kong is the institutions putting Hong Kong into the great position in the financial center for mainland China. So the finance in. So you can see that the finance sector in Hong Kong grow and grow and grow. And Hong Kong practice open market. And a lot of this top-notch professional financiers, many of them graduate from top universities around the world. The company is intensive. And then the Chinese had an advantage because they grew up there, they know the language, the social background, they are much better agents in Hong Kong to represent the West, to deal with the Chinese. So you can see this. And so it beat up income disparity, it creates a hollowing out of job opportunities. Then at the same time, you see there's a lot of negative press. They keep on saying, remember I show you all the rallies every year about give me universal suffrage and so on. The hardcore opposition keep on pressing, give me universal suffrage every year, and etc., etc. So if you were living there, this, what I just described in the past 5 minutes, is what you see. And you feel, holy mackerel, this is not what I choose to be. I have no say in this. How am I in such a situation? Okay? Then, so the thing would be immigration, high housing costs, high income inequality, cronyism, repressive China. These are the causes, supposedly, that lead to the current situation. I want to convince you that it's a lot more complicated than that. So let's go next. How about immigration? This is a chart that jot down. I belong to the group of immigrants in between 50 to 72, not me actually, my parents. There were 2 million out of 2 million, from 1.9 million to 3.9 million, or the 2 to 4 million in a matter of 20 years. You see that? You can look at the graphs. I don't have to read the numbers. The immigration problem was a lot worse in the past than now. Don't you see that? I don't have to read the numbers. You're all in Chicago. You're good at this, right? Next, housing costs. This chart is from South China Morning Post, actually from the Housing Authority. The blue represents general applicants' waiting time to get a government unit. The yellow represent older people. You look at them. It started in 97, and in which period was worse? It's not now, it was before. By all means, I grew up in a place that it is from here to here to here to here. It's just that. And it is one of the, what people say, Tong form. It's one of those. I grew up in those. And 7 of us live there. I do not know how my parents reproduced, by the way. We went through those before. Then you talk about income inequality. The bottom part is the genius. I gave you all the numbers. I think what catch your eye is that growing income inequality is really everywhere. The Hong Kong income inequality, according to something from strict time from Singapore press, is roughly jumped up by 0.8, this to this. The US jumped up by about, how much is this? About 8.2, 8.6. Everywhere. Then the other thing is cronyism. Corruption has gone down in Hong Kong because of MacLeod's reform, the ICAC. About cronyism, yes, there's cronyism, but it was there before. When I worked in Chase Manhattan in 1974, I received a memo from Hong Kong Bank, and they tell me what interest rate to charge. Okay. Nowadays, in the past, the government worked with the British interest. Now the government works with local tycoons. It's the same. So if you lived there before and old like me, you say, not a lot of change. Then judicial power, in the past, both the adjudication and interpretation were in London. Hong Kong had no business. At least now Hong Kong has adjudication and Beijing has interpretation. So it's not bad compared to the past. We have gone through all this before. Then, so in other words, I looked at the three things. Immigration, housing costs, income inequality, cronyism. We went through it. Hong Kong people, myself included, went through those before. So what is going on? Then, okay, now we have a new boss. Or may I use this word, new colonial master. I don't mean it, but it's just fun to use that term. Okay? Then you say, what did they do? Well, okay. They did, the Beijing did not allow me to have universal suffrage. I'm going to go through all the accusations about mainland China. Well, it turned out that Dong Jiehua asked for universal suffrage and was rejected. He and Chen Fang-Anzeng, I do not know who is responsible. The standing committee, because you change the election, you have to go through legislative change and you have to go through procedures and you take the whole thing to Beijing for reinterpretation. That's the normal procedure. The Beijing Standing Committee on April 6 of the year 2004 say the permission for amendment in selecting the chief executive and members of the Legislative Council must be made with the endorsement of a 2/3 majority of all members of the Legislative Council and the consent of the chief executive and shall be reported to the Standing Committee for approval. But reject because this was not met. So the rejection was procedural. You do not do your homework, you do not do, then you get rejected and you blame mainland China. By the way, what I just described, you can find that from Hong Kong government's thing. You can find it from the basic law full documentation. Then there's another rejection. It was submitted by Leung Zhenying this time, and he asked it for, and he followed all the procedures. And what did Beijing say? Beijing interpreted this. The ultimate aim, Article 45, is to a selection of the chief executive by universal suffrage, upon nomination by a broadly representative nomination committee in accordance with democratic procedure. That was the beginning of the statement of interpretation. Then what it said was, allow, please go ahead, but there's a condition, a nomination committee, this condition is connected to this condition. Comprised of equal representation of Hong Kong's four sectors: the professionals, the finance and real estate, and then the tourism, and also the trading industry. The four major sectors of the economy in Hong Kong. And then, so if you want to run for election, at the end, you have to get half of the nomination committee's approval. So essentially, they say, go ahead, but use representative democracy. Some of you may say, wait a minute, these four sectors, they are all like pro-Beijing, because many of them are business, etc., etc. So I don't trust them. You may say that, okay? But being pro-Beijing in an economy in Hong Kong, is it necessarily a bad thing? And being pro-Beijing for business, does it necessarily mean that these people will not care about Hong Kong? Does it mean that there's no chance for anyone, because the response did not say anything about how you form the nomination committee, and did not say anything whether you can run a primary and so on and so forth. So there are all kinds of ways that you can create accountability. But somehow the Hong Kong government, the Legislative Council voted it down. And then another rally, another protest, keep on saying that China is not giving them universal suffrage. I report truthfully what is documented, and let us judge whether that is the case or not on your own. The third thing is about the repressive China. China is taking more and more freedom away from Hong Kong. One interesting thing is that the Basic Law has Article 23, which required Hong Kong to develop and pass anti-subversion bill. And Hong Kong has not done that. Hong Kong floated in 2002, and I told you yesterday it created the formation of the CHRF, the Human Rights Front, and so on and so forth. And they rallied, and then the government backed off, took it off. But Beijing did not do anything. Did not do anything. Then you go on, wait, there's something. Did they not kidnap someone from the Four Seasons Hotel? Why did they do that? Why they did not make it transparent? Then there is this bookkeeper that was supposed to be was somehow arrested in Shenzhen. By the way, there's some information that he volunteered, he was lured to go to Shenzhen to report, and he was arrested here. What are these cases? Why does the CPC not fully reveal what they are to us? It all smells like there's some party struggle going on. So the behavior of Beijing, when you, after this three slides, you get the feeling that they are being accused at the same time because they are not fully disclosing what they are. There exists good reason for us to be suspicious. And there exists good reason for us to harbor some suspicion. So a lot of this is really about our emotion, our suspicion. It's not facts. It's not, I don't even know what facts are. Okay? Then, if you look at this, you ask the question. Hong Kong, the problem 1, 2, 3, I say, we have been there before, worse. Then it comes to about this scapegoat. I put down a question mark. I do not know. Okay. The lack of full disclosure is a major problem. Then you ask the question: 30 years of peaceful growth, and now this. So is there something else? Is there something else? Yesterday, I said, been there before, there was a bit of riot, and we had a compromise, rich and peaceful growth. Can we do the same this time? So let's move on. I think there are 5 differences that are really quite revealing. I'll talk about them. The first one is the change in social attitude. What do I mean by this? First, in the past, when I grew up, the identity in Hong Kong is really Chinese. We are Chinese. There's no identity problem, and we're all poor. We try to do something together. We are all in the same boat, make a living. But now, in this period, there's something really funny. You know that at the beginning of 1997, when a lot of the mainland Chinese moved to Hong Kong, they were not well received in the sense that in the school they were discriminated against. Does anyone have this experience? Thank you. And we can mock their accent. We can call them a Chan. It's a Cantonese term. We can call them no bill. It's another kind of Cantonese term. These are not favorable terms. So it was like that before. Then later on, an adult, you're competing with them on the job market, you find out that they are above you. When I first went back to China, 1986, I was a young assistant professor. There were 300 people in the hallway listening to me, taking notes. And I don't know if what I say makes sense or not. Because I was speaking things in my Mandarin that is like, sound like Cantonese, with a Cantonese accent. Someone walk up to me and say, Professor Yeung, your Cantonese is very good. Now, you walk into Beijing. Some people talk. And the full hall will be people trying to take notes. You think about how big the change are. So I ask a question. Is there anything about, if you live there, you are being discriminated against before, and later on, now you're not on top of it, and you're losing to people from your own countryside. The psychology is very complicated. And I don't know how to describe it, and I think the term I use, a combination of superiority and inferiority is not adequate to describe the sentiment that is there among the young people in Hong Kong. And also for some of the older people too. So that's part one. There's complicated change in social attitude. Past, we're working together, Tong no Tong bo, which is a Cantonese word, don't rock the boat. And now, we're different, with very complex psychology in our relationship. Second is the change in global geopolitical economic environment. When you think about America or the world open to China, what's it like? It is a poor agricultural country. And so let's help them, engage them, constructive engagement. They will, and the world will embrace and welcome them. But now, what do you think? I don't dare to say I represent anybody, but would it be the case that now it's growing to very big and is somewhat frightening, somewhat threatening? It becomes, instead of I help you, you're competing with me? Is it possible that there is a movement that we are into a regime of antagonistic engagement with China? So this is the global environment outside. All right? I do not know it's fair for me to say what I say. I'm just giving you description, and I can back them up with mass media accounts and the words they choose and so on and so forth. Okay? So the third point is the change in the political setting in Hong Kong. I grew up in Hong Kong, and I know what it's like. I already mentioned it multiple times. Hong Kong has an equilibrium. It's a borrowed place. It's our safe harbor. Let's work together. Don't rock the boat. We do not talk about politics. We make a living. We are in harmony. There is the 1997, somewhat undetermined, but it's okay. We don't worry too much about it. In the 50s, in the 60s, in the 70s, and even in the early 80s. What about now? Now, oh, by the way, I have to point out that in those days, the chief executive is appointed by the colonial affair. And he would parachute into Central District, and he would rule. And he and the London office will have connections and will have conference calls and will receive guidance every week. Ruling is in London. Implementation is in Hong Kong by all these AO administrative officers. That was the makeup in Hong Kong. Now what? Hong Kong has three branches: the executive branch, the legislative branch, and the independent judicial branch. Then Beijing did not do what London did, which is meet with them every week and tell them what to do. Beijing did not. There was no, you can call Mrs. Ansem Chen and asked her if she was still the number 2 in the government, and did she receive anything from Beijing after the Passover? You can ask. Then maybe I'm wrong, but what I understand is that Beijing did not keep the same practice. And actually, think about it, in my opinion, in those days, Beijing was trying to learn from Hong Kong. They sent people to Hong Kong to learn about how to run the government in those days. As well, they sent some to Singapore too. And then the chief executive in the past would chair and direct and control enough votes in the legislative council. Now, don't know. There is real separation and balance of the trials. Then we have a pro-democratic group that I explained it yesterday is a coalition of opposition. They say no, 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 no to many things, as I at the beginning remind you of. Then there exists another group that is pro-business, and they say yes, yes, yes to all the tycoons. We know that. Well, we don't know that, but we speculate that's the case. This is being recorded, so I better be careful what I say. I don't know that, but there is this allegation. Then the other thing is Hong Kong is also influenced by the outside political factions. Do you think that Beijing would really have no influence on Hong Kong? Do you think that Washington would really have no influence in Hong Kong? Hong Kong become a collection of multiple interests, not necessarily coherent. In the past, the interest is very coherent. Keep Hong Kong stable, make money. Now we don't know. So that is a situation that the government is in a disequilibrium, and then the mass media is going very loose. I yesterday used the word irresponsible reporting. They use very speculative statements. They would say just very speculative statements, and then they may clarify the content underneath and so on and so forth. But some of you are journalists. How many of you are journalists? Okay, but I hope you know what, I think you know what I mean. You can pick and choose the title, and then you can report the content. Unavoidably, the mass media would have to try to do something to capture the readers that they want to capture. So the mass media continuously criticize the government, blame the rich, and blame China. And the politicians, because of the opposition politics, they keep on raising accusing finger. And every day in Hong Kong, you receive this kind of thing in the newspaper. And the bureaucrats, they're scared. They're most afraid of judicial review. So everybody tries to to practice risk avoidance. So that is the situation in the government, the operation, as well as the disconcordance. Then the mass media. I'm not against mass media thing, and so this is just my personal viewpoint. I may be wrong. Hong Kong got rid of the control mass media. Good or bad, I don't know. Let me stay silent. But I do believe there exists some newspaper that are practicing very catchy type of reporting and title and speculation. I know of the fact that some company would tell their staff that they cannot bring a certain newspaper into the office because the newspapers are very disruptive. And I don't want to say this only from one side, it's both sides. So I would say that, I emphasize that there is this various kinds of biased, exaggerated news going around. Well, that's normal in our society. But we're in a new world. We have the social media. The social media is really funny, or maybe sadly funny. You look at President Obama in a speech in Singapore, which I attended, say this: the crowd need to take responsibility. Well, let me ask you this question: have you heard that Hong Kong police shot protesters? Have you heard that? How many of you have heard that? How many of you heard that Hong Kong protesters attacked a policeman and therefore the policeman shot? Less. Okay, where do you get them? From, where do you get yours? Facebook. Okay. The whole thing is like this. A policeman, and there were 3 or 4 crowding towards him, with his gun, and someone hit his hand, and shoom, the shot went out. And someone was shot there.
Were you there? Were you there at the scene when that happened?
No, I was not there, but a friend sent me the full picture. I so far just described the picture. I didn't say anything.
I've watched that video too, and
What?
inaccurate like retelling of the story.
I think what you raise underscore the point I want to
Sure,
make.
it does, definitely does.
I want to underscore the point I made that. The point I wanted to make is that not tell the truth. Some cut on one part, other cut another part. And because of all the technology and all this, what we have is inability to tell the truth. And very often it's things that you try to up the ante. The louder your voice, the more you get hurt. So everyone does that. And all this produced. And then the another one is like someone was set in fire, immediately there was another video and say, oh, here's a stuntman. I don't want to say I know the truth. I only want to say that this create a lot of noise, exaggeration, and the louder you speak, the better you get attention, you get your like. At the end, we find out that people are polarized. The noisier the signal, the less you're able to tell the truth. And the more extreme the signal, the more you're polarized. At the end of the day, we are losing our vision of what's truth. We are losing our rationality. We are using emotion, and we are looking for things that support our emotion very often. And that's scary. That's what the society is becoming. In this sense that besides that we are doing this, they exert master control of this. You mentioned Facebook. There could be the mainland part, there could be the non-mainland part. There's so many of this, they're able to control. They can say that your account violated usage, whatever and whatever. Outright block it. So at the end, I don't want to make any value judgment. I just want to say that the technology has created a more divisive society. We judge based on our stance, not because facts are so hard to come by. We become more emotional, and that is my speculation. Yes.
You mentioned changes in the world. Many countries, like Taiwan, the United States, South Korea, have open and free media and open and free social media where there is controversy and discussion, but very few of them have the major population turning out in the streets to protest their chief executive. What do you think is the difference? Why is social media so much of a bigger problem in Hong Kong?
I do not say that this is the driving problem in Hong Kong. I give you multiple areas. I haven't finished. At the same time, let's remember that the Taiwan, the sunflower movement, is against the government, is an angel. So your statement factually is somewhat questionable. Okay? And there are many countries that are having a lot of emotion. There exists a lot of countries, other countries, that they do have, I wouldn't say riot, but let's say movements that use force. Okay? Let me go on here. By the way, I'm not saying that, I'm just asking us to think along. And what I start with, would it be the case that Hong Kong is a condensed and intensified version of the world that we are facing? Making some adjustments and so on, and I'll try to get to that point. All right, the next thing I want to say is that, now this is something I speculate, we don't know. When I grew up in Hong Kong, I said there was identity. Identity was Chinese. And we learned that identity through our history books. I understand that history is not a required subject in Hong Kong anymore. And by the way, in my days, my teachers, they were refugees in a way from China. Some of them were university professors. They came into Hong Kong, and they're very good in history, good at teaching history and literature, and they were our teachers. So unavoidably, they would be very fond of the Chinese culture and so on and so forth. So unavoidably, we learn an identity like this. I'm just describing facts that I experienced. Well, sorry, not facts. I'm describing my own experience. Then, in the current era, I'm just waiting. I understand that history is taken out. I ask the question whether history is important in developing an identity. The second thing is that somehow Mandarin is not a required subject, but a required subject in Hong Kong is called liberal studies. And if you look at this subject, it has this pretty respectable curriculum. Self and social development, family, community development, nation and the world's development, public health, natural resources, and environment. It's really respectable. But interestingly, I cannot find textbooks. You have a curriculum but have no textbooks. Do we have standardized the textbooks in the US? No? Okay. But there are no textbooks. And I was told, I consult someone who is very high up and was a minister, and I will not reveal her name here, but she told me that there were no texts and there were no material. And then the teachers very often in the morning have to cut and paste from newspapers to use that as teaching material. We do that in the university too. So I don't know. What does that do? But then you look at the exam questions, you find out that the exam questions, which is compulsory, concentrate on Hong Kong's situation, current affairs, and the governance. The question on China, health and environment, skewed towards pollution, epidemic controls, corruption, and urban-rural disparity. So these are the questions. All these are available that you can check. I don't know what all this do to people, but I put down the question. A, are the teachers really qualified to study very profound topics when they're not trained as social scientists or like an economist and so on and so forth? So I wonder that. I have that question. And then they asked them to teach a very important subject. And then the other thing I want to say is that, is it true or is it not true that teaching history and teaching the language is very important? In Singapore, no doubt, the government paid a lot of attention to the language education, okay, and history education. So I'll leave it at that here. So there are 5 things, and what do they do? What I'm describing here is a diagram that I put yesterday and 2 days together. There is an opposition party and a hardcore opposition, and they support the reforms, and then they say no to a lot of the policies. At the same time, Hong Kong habitually and the pro-business party always just support free markets, etc., etc. So little 1, little 2, 1, 2, little 3. And then I describe these 5 things, and it becomes like they feel into each other. All the dissatisfactions are not just there, but there exists a lot of social movements, and I'm not saying anyone planned this, but there exists a lot of things happening. And I highlight 2 things. In red, the change in the geopolitical environment and the change in the Hong Kong political setting. This facilitate all the rest of the change. So I beg a question. I like democracy. I beg a question. In a democratic society, we cannot fault people for pressing for what they believe in. They should be given freedom to do that. The question is how we work together. How do we deal with this different people's pursuit? Come together in a democratic way, in a peaceful way, in a constructive way to move forward. That, I think, is what I hope we can find a solution to. I can make conjectures. I want to save some time for discussion, so I can make some conjectures. And I've said enough about there's some multiple government failure. So I skip that. Why keep on saying the nasty things? So let me go on to ask this question. And I'm affected, like I said yesterday, by a very good book written by your Professor Bernard Yeung. He talked about the market, the state, and the third pillar is community. I changed it a little bit, using my own word, but I think I have to learn from him more. There is a deep issue. There's the market. We all have to have the market. We all need to have the government. The government has to work with the market. And it has to balance the market incentives and safety net. It has to balance the interest, the short-term, long-term interest, the interest of the current generation, the interest of the future generation, the interest of those who are underrepresented, and hold down a little bit those that are very well represented. The government needs this balancing act. And Hong Kong, in my opinion, showcase what not to do. I don't want to go back to that again, but I ask a question. So how do we do that? To maintain this balance, we also have to keep in mind, I talked about big adjustment. China grew extremely fast, and is extremely a big country. Hong Kong is at the doorstep. And technology is changing all the time. So this balance, that the government work with the market to balance the interests of many, many groups, is not a static balance. It's a very, very dynamic and fast-changing balance. So how do you achieve that? You need to engage the society in continuous dialogues, continuous discussion, and you have to explain to them, and you have to consult them, and you have to try to come up with something sensible that everyone will buy. Almost in a way, you have to, well, in a way you have to love them if you're the government. So how do you do that? The government is not a vacuum. The government is backed up by people, by the society. So I feel that in maintaining this right balance in this fast-changing world, you need to develop a society with a common spirit, with a common identity. And many societies have subgroups, and all the subgroups are fighting. But only when you have one common agreement that we are all this, then you can get to a compromise. That the little we is willing to cede territories to the larger we. And the other thing is that because the world is, I just described all this, the getting this concordance, people are moving farther and farther away from each other, no common ground because of all this thing, all this mass of social media. The point is, maybe what we need to do is to really make sure that we have an intelligent society. People will seek information. People will accept rational debate and form informed judgment. And so, and also how we can get such a society. And I do believe that we need strong family value and strong education, and that is really the third pillar in the communities that Bernard Yeung talked about. Maybe that's the case. It's a dynamic balance. We have a lot of things to do. And what I really worry about in Hong Kong, I'll get you your hand reactions, okay? What I worry about in Hong Kong is that I worry that it's losing its cohesiveness and losing a lot of trust. And I don't know how. And I thought about how we can come up with trust, how we can come up with a sense of togetherness. Hong Kong can be, I'll fresh it out and I won't read this. Imagine Hong Kong maintain its democracy. Imagine Hong Kong maintain its rule of law. Imagine that Hong Kong maintain its highly capable education system and so on and so forth. And it's able to bring such a civilized society into a larger country that really is in need of continuous improvement and reforms and so on. How beautiful that will be. And if we are able to, out of this, build coherent and society with good vision that care for people's interest. Now, in the future, the poor, the richer, all together. Hong Kong would be like in the past, a phoenix growing out of ash. It can showcase the world that you can deal with rapid adjustment, you can deal with all this fractionalization, you can deal with all this protest and whatnot, but you can come together again and make the world better for the whole world to see. Your turn.
I actually agree with you that the government has been completely ineffectual. It's contributed to much of what's happened in Hong Kong. But to speak to your solution of like what needs to be done, I argue that at least in the yellow faction, we've seen that. We've seen humongous creativity. We've seen this cohesiveness. We've seen a willingness to learn, to educate themselves. When you talk about discrimination to 1997 against mainlanders, we've seen incredible amounts of reflection on the part, at least on the yellow faction, like we should not be discriminating, we should be in solidarity with ethnic minorities, as we saw with the situation in Shanghai, where the police accidentally, or maybe whatever it is with the mosque. But we've seen all this happening. And
so far,
okay, can I finish? And when you were questioning liberal studies and the quality of the teachers, I have friends who are such liberal studies teachers. I will tell you that they're more than competent. They could have given the same lectures that you gave here today and yesterday, maybe with different results, but they could have given us the same facts. They could have gone into it. So they are of a very high quality.
That is also what the Minister for Education said, Mr. Kim. He said the same thing. And he said that's why the market force is working. What I said, when I talk about those, I put down question marks. Those are for future studies. I'm not pointing an accusing finger. That's point one. I just say that I want to know what they are, what's the impact. The second, and based on research. The second thing is that what you say about the yellow, I would say what you said, if you delete the word yellow, make it general. There are multiple sides that are also working in this way. They are also creative, and they also want things to quiet down. And therefore, in my solution, I say, let us all apologize. Every party here, yellow, blue, police, non-police, the government, and the newspaper, we all, if you dig deep, myself included, in the past 7 months, must have done something that we wish we did not do. And if, let us say, in a family, say, husband and wife, they're quarreling, I believe the very effective way to restore peace is apologize, I'm sorry, sincerely, then sit down and plan. And all this creativities, all these things that you described, they may work, but not apply to one group, to everyone, please.
But the problem is, you're talking of the different power dynamics here. You can't expect an oppressed, and I'm using that word in the most liberal form, that like the protesters, we're going to apologize for violence against the police, even though the police
and the police will have to apologize, and the police also have to.
Right. What I'm trying to speak to is that what you're painting here is a very idealistic picture, whereby everybody kumbaya, that's come together around a campfire and that sing songs together. But this just doesn't work. It just really doesn't work. So I'd really like to know, what kind of actual concrete solutions do you have for you bring up all these issues that's going on, and the other thing is you keep comparing Hong Kong to Singapore. Singapore is I grew up in both Hong Kong and Singapore. Singapore is a quasi-autocratic authoritarian government. There's really no point in comparing these societies. I mean, if you are going to, then you're taking the China line where we'd like Hong Kong to turn into another Singapore. That's
I did not say that.
I know that you did not say that, but everything that you've said in these 2 days, this is very misleading. non-stance
I'm sorry.
It's just for
Would you
subjectivity.
please
I'm sorry.
let's don't use any label, okay?
Oh.
I try not to. And by the way, there's a...
I'm responding to your labels.
Sorry. I wanted to ask a completely different, and I'm sorry I wasn't here yesterday. I've been sitting here thinking about the virus and about Hong Kong, the pressures on Hong Kong and the mainland and everything. What do you think, how does what's happening right now play into this history and what's happening? I mean, we teach in Hong Kong, we have a campus there, we have students.
I'm very worried because the confrontation is still ongoing. I do not deny that. Maybe some people harbor the feeling that it's hopeless, I have to fight. It has to be a revolution. Maybe someone say that. But maybe someone say that I want to have a more constructive solution. The fighting is ongoing, it has not died down. For example, the medical sector. And I worry about the government communication and the lack of trust and the confrontational behavior. Make it more challenging, more difficult to contain this dreadful situation. That's not. So what I hope is that can we just sit down, stop, can we just cooperate? Yes, idealistic, yes, I am. Can we just cooperate for a little bit, for a little while, give ourselves 3 months, get this over with first? Yes.
So first of all, thank you for coming and doing the talk. I've learned a lot. My question is about the transition period that started in 1997 to 2048, where I think, I'm not too familiar with the facts, but I think at that point Hong Kong would fully sort of be an autocratic
Yes.
sort of segment of China, and this dual sort of government system would end. How does that, in your mind, sort of play into the calculus? And do you think that's fundamentally like very pessimistic, that because there's this inevitable deadline that with the increasing encroachment of the Chinese government that things aren't going to get better and could get worse?
I honestly do not know, and I have no authority in answering this question. I can think of multiple versions. Someone say that if I want to turn Hong Kong into Singapore, I am not trying to do that. But unfortunately, Singapore, for me at this juncture, that on my slides, I have quote the Singapore Prime Minister's judgment, which is right here. He said it in public, so I guess I can say that. He said that Hong Kong has to work with the mini constitution, the basic law. You can read the paragraph. So his perception, according to the statement, is that we have to work within what is permissible and get it done. Okay. Now I cannot deny the possibility that something will happen. Some people were thinking, can we have a prolonged contract beyond 1947? That version has come out. Okay. And so it is, and then so it is one way. No deal must cooperate as only thing. Otherwise, you lose. Another way is that to prolong the contract, and maybe we can work together to make life not just the rich, but also the poor, and not just the Hong Kong people, but many people around Hong Kong better. For me, again, I'm idealistic again. Yes, please.
Hi, yeah, thank you. So very recently in the local district elections, pro-democracy forces picked up 90% of the seats, and the polling out of Hong Kong indicates the strong majority of the population supports the protesters. I'm curious to ask you if you think the big problem in Hong Kong is just that protests are happening and people are not getting along and that we just need to get together, or is the problem that a majority of the population is asking for political and democratic rights that a mainland Chinese government is unwilling to grant them now and will wipe out in 2047?
I think the statement that the mainland Chinese will not give this and that and will wipe them out is a speculative statement. How the Chinese make decisions, I already said earlier, I just don't know. I do agree that the vote is a dissatisfaction vote. Okay? They do feel that the government was ineffective, and I do think that they want more representation. I do think that they have legitimate rights to cast their dissatisfaction vote. Yesterday, in the ending 5 minutes, I described all the dissatisfactions that people have. I'm an old man, and I'm an academic, and also at some point in time I run a school, and I find out that we all in life will have our dissatisfaction. What I beg everyone to think about is to convert your dissatisfaction into something constructive, okay? To help people, and that would be that would be what I have in mind, okay? What will the Chinese do? I do not know. And think about elastic bands. If you pull too much, it will break. If you pull enough, it will work. I saw two hands. Maybe I'll take both, 1 and 2.
Okay. So I think it makes sense that for a solution, both parties need to work together. That definitely seems obvious. But do you think China, mainland China, being the larger, more powerful party here, has a responsibility to initiate some goodwill to kickstart discussions here?
My inclination that it will, it may, it is going to do. At the same time, there will be some trade-off. Okay, that's I mean, they're changing all the guards. Whenever you start changing of guard, you will have a new regime. And what things are like, we'll find out. But if the change is in the mind of many people in mainland. Do not forget the basic law said that Hong Kong is an inalienable part of China. Okay. I think that would be the non-negotiable point. Yes.
Okay, so I think one of the things that a lot of different parties can agree on is the terrible governance and kind of the by the Hong Kong government itself, the entire unrest, and overall for the past 20 years or so. And part of the reason me personally think is that these people, the leaders of the Hong Kong government, were not truly leaders because they have been in the past in the colonial areas mostly like implementers instead of someone who actually lead, right? But given kind of the boundaries that we're working within, and given the people that we have right now, are there things that they could do just by themselves to make things better, or do we have to flip the entire village actually?
I think again, there are multiple perspectives. Some people, including some in this room, to say we have a revolution. Some people say, I said it earlier, constructive dissatisfaction. I think that a lot of the things in Hong Kong are made by the government in Hong Kong, not by outside. I said in my finishing slides here, say we need to improve policy making process. I do feel that we need to improve the sense of responsibility, not just the executive branch, but also the legislative council. All right? There's something in my mind I missed. You might repeat your I think I missed something.
Yeah, I was just saying, what are some of the tactical things that the government can do without, constantly Beijing, or without, reaching out to the whole Hong Kong society? Are there, immediate...
For example, the housing, they can easily do, okay? The change in the zoning law, they can easily do. Raise the tax, they can easily do. Hong Kong's tax system is extremely regressive. Okay? They can do a lot of redistribution, and Beijing will not object. There are a lot of things you can do. And if there's need, maybe there isn't. If there's some need in education reform, do so too, because Hong Kong's graduates need to be more competitive in the global workplace. So all this Hong Kong government can do, and increase the communication, enhance the communication with people is very important. So in the past 7 months, how often has the Hong Kong chief executive communicated with people? How do they explain things?
It's the last question. Hello, thank you for coming to talk with us. So I'm a little bit confused about some of the causes you isolate to explain the extended unrest. So you pointed out a few major causes that you felt really contributed. And today, you talk about how many of these causes were very big in the past during the previous instances of unrest. So could you highlight the new things? Is it those exogenous factors, you think?
I cannot answer this question. What I would confess is the following. At the beginning, I thought that the economics and the well-known complaint about high housing costs, hollowing out, income disparity, and all this are the causes. Okay, but I find out that no, they are not. There are many other factors. They're all coming in. So it's almost like you cannot even well define what the dependent variable is. Then you find it very difficult to define the independent variables and run a regression. I'm trying to paint in this a structural equation model, and I'm asking scholars to come together to think about it. And my worry is that if what I said is right, then it's really about the whole world's change. Then it is this part. It's Hong Kong's experience. Then we see in some other countries, all the protests and so on and so forth. Would Hong Kong be just an intensified, condensed version of how the world is adjusting to all the changes? That's the question. And if I have an answer, my book will be done. I'm working on it. I don't have an answer, but thanks for pointing out the murkiness in what I say. Are we set?
So